So we're at our last panel of the day, the last panel of the entire show. And this one's going to be about where we're going to find mass adoption. It's always talked about. Can it be user experience? Can it be this place or that place? Well, this panel is going to explore, is enterprise the future of Web3 adoption? Please put your hands together for this expert panel, our last panel of the day, and re-invite up Filippo Chisaro.
I'm going to skip my intros and speak and ask our panelists to intro themselves because I think that they have the best insight into the enterprise world today. So let's welcome Diego, Kary, and David. Please, Diego, do you want to start maybe introducing yourself briefly?
Yeah, I basically consult Fortune 500 brands on how to enter Web3 and immersive experiences, Metaverse, whatever you want to call it. I work with large organizations on helping them sort of like strategize their entrance, go-to-market strategies, branding, marketing. I've been within that industry of marketing and branding since I was 16 years old. So I've been, client side and agency side for all my career. Back in 2007, I was helping brands like Samsung, like Warner Bros, Red Bull, entering gaming, where gaming and esports, the console was in the basement, not in the living room. So it was an upcoming, still sort of like culture and space. And I sort of like try always to find the next upcoming, either technology or culture where brands can play within. And since I would say May 21, I dove really deep into Web3, into NFTs. I was at Adidas before in the headquarters in Germany for about 4 years, consulting that in different parts of digital. And we got together as a bunch of friends that were passionate about NFTs and Web3 and Metaverse back then, help launching and strategizing into the Metaverse, which was Adidas' entrance to Web3 back in December 21. From there, I left Adidas to do what I always done, which is consulting brands. So I went to work with Salesforce, with Unilever, with L'Oreal, with MasterCard, with Volkswagen, so Porsche, Cupra, Skoda, and also Shell, the energy company. So I've been sort of like navigating that space and ecosystem to help brands understand the possibilities of the next iteration of the web.
Kary.
I'm Kary Bheemaiah. I'm Chief Tech and Innovation Officer at Capgemini Invent. I oversee a lot of the emerging tech initiatives that we've got going on over there. My involvement with Web3 within the company has been going on for close to 3 years. We do a lot of work with companies like Swift, with CBDCs, and I'm also the co-lead for the Metaverse Lab, where we do really trying to figure out the interplay between AR, VR, along with Web3 technologies as well.
Kary is also our advisor at Agile. So.
And I'm advisor along with in AgileGTM for Filippo. Yeah.
Please.
My name's David Palmer. I'm the blockchain lead for Vodafone. Also the chief product officer of a new platform we've got, which is bringing together Web3 and cellular technologies called Digital Asset Broker. I'm really excited to be here today.
Amazing. So I maybe just, from a generic standpoint, I just want to say that, before we're talking about where investment is going into the Web3 space, and we started talking about adoption in general, it looks as if, adoption is coming from the enterprise world, right? And so I'd like to hear your perspective on what you've seen from the brands that you've worked with respectively, and, the work that you've done within brands as well. Where is it going in the future? I think that we're speaking about it earlier. In the last few years, we've been having brands adopt Web3 space for customer-facing activities, and now we're looking at brands in a different way. And the enterprise world is thinking about adopting Web3 technology for ROI-driven efforts, right? For the back end, for optimizing operations or the back end of it. So I'd love to hear, from the front end to the back end, I guess. Obviously Diego's perspective with customer-facing activities with brands, and then Kary's, and also yours specifically, deep diving into what you've been doing with Vodafone. So yeah, please.
Yeah, it's an exciting space. I think that a lot of brands that are still experimenting are trying to discover the possibilities within that space right now are understanding that the web is evolving as it always been. It's been from the beginning of the internet and keeps evolving and will continue to evolve. And a lot of those brands that are now bringing those type of technologies more from a consumer-facing perspective are understanding the possibilities and the benefits of being early to the new iterations of the web, right? I tend to say that from a adoption perspective or from a mainstream perspective, we are at a point that, you know, is almost similar to what the web was in 92, 93, 94. So a lot of brands, especially within that Fortune 500 caliber, have missed the opportunity to be early within that digital transformation. And then they also miss the opportunity of being early within e-commerce, and then they miss the opportunity of being early with social. So by learning those missed opportunities and also the impact that missing those opportunities has had within their business models, they are now trying to reverse engineer that to be early to the next iteration, right? So that's what I think is the real sort of like motivation for a lot of those that are invested today. I think from an adoption perspective, I was talking earlier today that I believe that major organizations are the one that will bring mainstream adoption to this technology, not just because they are super large and they have impact, but because as long as they understand how to create better experiences or enhance already existing products by using the right technology to provide that service to their customers, that's going to be the way that they're going to bring that large amount of customers that they have already, right? Especially when they tap into the Web2 audience. I said before today as well that if you look into the Web3 native audience, especially within sort of like the NFT spectrum, you have about 1 million active wallets. I have 8. I don't know how many you guys have, but that 1 million wallets does not equal unique users, meaning we could potentially put all NFT active users today inside of a stadium, right? That's how fucking crazy small that audience still is, which displays that the real opportunity for brands is rather on their already existing audience versus trying to tap and stretch themselves to, you know, sort of like leverage or attend the space where this audience is at. So a lot of the practice and the work I'm doing with those brands is connected to that, trying to help them reverse engineer the problem and the opportunity that they currently have within their audience, already existing audience, and why Web3 technology is the best technology to do it. Does it mean that it's always the best technology to do it? 100% not. And whenever it's not, I tend to advise them to look for something else, because we, especially last year, within that sort of like Fortune 500 realm, have used technology first approach versus problem first or opportunity first. And I think that has created a lot of the negativity that we still see in our space of either companies failing or board groups not necessarily wanting to invest or deploy resources against that space anymore. And I think that we're going to start seeing a more mature you know, way of looking at this space within the upcoming cycles. You know, I'm really excited about that, because if we can play a role actively, regardless of that is being building thought leadership or stuff that you guys are doing as well, that you're obviously going to talk about in the very beginning of the next iteration of the web, imagine how that's going to look like 5-10 years from now, right? And that's, for me, is what's really exciting.
Yeah, so I'd pick up on what he's saying, which is giving value to the end customer. When it comes to blockchain or Web3 or AI or any tech that it is, we really don't have a dog in the fight. The main thing is, what does the client actually want? So we are a $22 billion company, you know, we spread across the world. We have a large number of clients, and when they come towards us and say, look, we want to be able to explore this technology, for us it's really about seeing how does it solve an existing problem that they've got, either by reducing bottom line costs or in order to drive top line revenue. So when it comes to a lot of the banks that we work with, we have, you know, we work with all the tier ones, we work with a lot of central banks as well. Over there, they're really trying to figure out not only how do they build their own blockchains, but how do you ensure that they're not dumb, deaf, and blind? And what do I mean by that? On one side, you need to connect your existing IT system to this blockchain. And on the other hand, if you've got different CBDCs working together, then they need to be able to communicate between it. So we've actually created a bit of a niche for ourselves in this space, because we've been working with Swift, for example, which is doing exactly that. They're building a bridge between 4 different central banks. And we don't care if it's retail or wholesale or hybrid. We're adaptable to all of that. But more importantly, how do you kind of like connect those things together and make sure that if you're going to be able to provide any kind of a tokenized solution or any kind of a CBDC solution, that your ability to interconnect and exchange value between them, that's where we come in. We're integrators, we help integration, and we do it at scale. We don't do it just for a POC or an MVP. We talk about SLAs, service level agreements, level 1, 2, 3, because we're really taking care of a lot of the things that happen behind the scenes.
Amazing. Please, did you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question. I mean, for those of us who have been in the Web3 journey for a long time, it started off as an ideal, and it started off as a revolution to change the way that people interacted with financial systems and to decentralize that. And I think if you look at if you take a step back and look at it, we've had adoption. I think we've had headlines, and everything's relative. But if you look at the hardline statistics, by 2030, there's forecast to be 5.6 billion digital wallets, not crypto wallets, digital wallets. There's forecast to be 8 billion smartphones. I'd say bank accounts have the same sort of interaction. AI, I think this famous story of OpenAI or ChatGPT amassing 100 million users in the first 6 weeks of launch. And these are the sort of mass hyperscaler adoptions where these technologies, mobile phones, cloud, AI, well, not so much AI now, but cloud, digital wallets are part of our everyday lives. People are using Apple Pay, Google Pay, etc. And crypto and Web3, I use the two interchangeably, have not really made the same sort of mark yet, right? So, and I think there's good reason for that. I think I think we've had a lot of good innovation, DeFi, wallets, digital identity, smart contracts, but the technology, the protocols, the speed, the ability to integrate with legacy were not at the level of maturity. I think what we've seen, especially with the with the Ethereum merge, is that public blockchains are now starting to get to a level where enterprise will use them. I think that's the headline that we've had over the last 2 years, and I think that's borne out by the amount of brands. I was amazed at the amount of brands using Web3 for NFTs. So I think that is a start. I think the key message for adoption is interoperability of technologies. The mistake or not mistake that Web3's made is that we have built protocols and we've expected the world to come to those protocols, use our UI, use our APIs and do everything on that protocol, like a different world. And actually what we're learning now is that the key to the future of technology is how Web3, AI, blockchain, IoT, enterprise systems, government systems come together and converge to provide solutions that really meet requirements and can enable businesses and people to realize the opportunities. And I think that is the key. So what we've been doing at Vodafone and what I've personally been spearheading is how do you link cellular technology to Web3? How do you make a SIM card sign on a blockchain? Right? How can you make a connected car be part of a blockchain? And we've successfully did that. I'm pleased to say that the digital asset broker platform that I co-founded now has 160 million connected devices, which are part of the blockchain ecosystem that we founded. And that's just the beginning. There's 30 billion IoT devices scheduled to be in operation by 2030. At Vodafone, we have 400 million smartphones. There's 8 billion out there. So I think the key to adoption is going to be how Web3 learns to play with these mainstream components.
I agree 100% because, to give another statistic, 57% of data that's created today in the world isn't stored in enterprise storage. It's getting created on the edge, it's getting created on the devices that David was mentioning. And no matter how much you believe in AI, AI doesn't work without good data. Not just data quantity, but data quality. So if you're going to be able to move, computation to where the data is getting created, and this is a topic that is increasingly becoming important in Web3. We speak to firms who are doing it. Now you start understanding that if you want to have the computation move to where the data is getting created, that's something very different. Plus, it's an untapped market. There's so much information that's getting created. It's thrown away today. We just don't use it because it's too expensive to send to the cloud, compute it, send the result back. So that kind of decentralized and distributed computation, that's where the blockchain actually is. We are looking at it today at an infrastructure level. They're not looking at it from the perspective of, yeah, we can have some kind of coin or an NFT that comes out of it. There's other people who do that. They do it better than us. But infrastructure tech, really talking about data, compute, and models, things that don't really change. That's where we actually see a good marriage between AI, data, cloud, and of course, Web3.
Yeah, I think that so what you guys are saying, the enterprise world doesn't really care if it's Web3 tech or not. They just have business goals, and whatever their goals are, maybe sometimes they're customer facing, sometimes they're not customer facing, they're business operations, they're ROI driven, but they have goals, and they try to follow what their need is, and they're going to implement that with different kinds of technology. And I think that that's the main takeaway here. It's not about the Web3 space specifically, is they're looking to use technology. And Web3 very often seems to be the best possible solution, but at the same time, there's something that's stopping the enterprise world from going into kind of full-on adoption. And so last year, I think, like we're saying before, we've seen the customer-facing side take over, and that was just the first step into, let's almost play around with it, or let's get accustomed with it to feel comfortable, to see how we can use it. Yeah. And then, from there, we're going into kind of implementing it at an infrastructure level. And obviously in the mobile world as well, and that's also an infrastructure play. But I think that these things are also cyclical, so I'd like to take your opinion on that, because the idea was, a couple of years ago, blockchain tried to be implemented at an enterprise level, right? Like the permissioned blockchains, and then people were like, oh, we don't need blockchain now, it's not good enough for us. And now, then, it hyped. Blockchain hyped because of Web3 becoming a thing because of NFTs and the world knowing that. And then eventually we went again into enterprise adoption, which is again going almost to the back end like we're saying before. So I wonder, what is, do you agree, first of all, that this thing is a cyclical thing where we're going to keep on, going from back end to front end in a way? And secondly, what do you think is the missing part right now in terms of ensuring that the enterprise world picks this up and doesn't let this go and sees the opportunity, or seizes the opportunity today?
So I think it's important to understand that there's always an oscillation between curiosity and saturation. So a couple of years back, when we used to go and talk to clients about blockchain, you had to do the whole, what is a blockchain kind of explanation. And because it was just simpler, they preferred to go with the private blockchain because they were trying to actually build the solution and see how it works. What's happened since then is, number one, they've realized that the ecosystem that gets created around a public blockchain is so good and so fast that it's just better to kind of work with them. Plus, they've been able to prove their point, so now it's safe enough for them to move over there. And the second thing is, they are able to see the value through the POCs that they did. So if you're an investor, you get someone who comes and pitches to you. They don't say, I have a great business that runs on AWS. It's just a good business. So it's the same thing over here. I've got a great concept. I can reduce your cost by 40%. I can reduce your settlement time from T+2 to T+0, while regulations are asking T+1. So I'm actually ahead of the curve. That's when they start saying, okay, fine, how do we deploy it? How do we make it as simple as possible for the end user? And how do we ensure that we're getting that gain through it, mostly at the bottom line, and if it's possible, at the top line as well.
So basically you're saying that it's about saving time and money in a way, which is kind of the more traditional kind of,
like
the traditional, like any business, right? But then again, I would want to have your opinion then in that case about this, because how do we then bridge that gap between short-term and long-term? Because theoretically speaking, today businesses are thinking about Web3, but they're thinking about it in the short term, and ROI-driven efforts are always short-term, but the truth is, entering the Web3 space is the long-term play. The reason to do that is because you see that you don't want to lose your customers in 10 years, right? Or you want to make sure that happens. So I'd love to hear your opinion on this, Diego.
Yeah, I mean, I have sort of like a hot take on your initial question, which I feel that one of the things that is holding back Web3 as a whole, still as an industry, to stand alone and live with its own legs is the close association with cryptocurrency, especially volatile assets like Ethereum or even Bitcoin from an asset perspective, from a digital asset perspective, right? What does that mean is that last year when Bitcoin was 60 grand, the hype around cryptocurrencies was very high. There was a lot of liquidity, so it was all about NFTs, it was all about money, making money, it was all about that sort of like liquidity element of that, right? As long as we keep going that direction as an industry, I think we're going to be held back from a cyclical perspective depending on how high and low that asset is. So if number goes up, Web3 is alive. If number goes down, Web3 is dead. So I think that that's one of the major elements still that we need to develop as an industry, because blockchain does not equal cryptocurrencies, right? Cryptocurrencies as one use case of blockchain. And I think that's still the mainstream view, is that blockchain is just cryptocurrencies, obviously because it started with Bitcoin back in 2009, but it has evolved so much that can be way beyond than that, right? So I think that that initial look at that brings us to the second element, which we were talking about, which is how do we get then enterprises to understand that, yes, there are ways for you to monetize today, but you should rather be thinking about building the infrastructure and the guardrails of how your company can change, because that's all what innovation is about, 10, 5 years down the road, right? And especially if you look from, I'm a marketing guy, so I'm always looking from a customer experience or from a branding point of view or from a new sort of like audience perspective. If you see how the upcoming generation is already much more familiar to consuming, buying, trading, purchasing, owning digital assets, it's extremely easy for you to see how customer behavior will shape and change to that direction, because we've been spending 8 to 10 hours a day in the digital world connected to the web, but we don't own shit digitally, right? So that needs to change for us to start being able to have the same sense of ownership that we have in the physical world, and that's exactly what Web3 is going to enable as well. So I think that that's an interesting way of looking to that, because if you feel that this is the future, if you understand that that's the future, the upcoming generations will be already accustomed to that, but it's going to take a minute for them to become your prior customer. You need to do what you are doing already with your brand strategy anyway, which is paving the way for 5, 10, 15 years down the line, that you will be able to serve that audience whenever they are ready to become your customer, right? So one of the things I try to do, especially from a marketing perspective, is always help brands to look into their brand strategy, because those are long-term plans, to then understand how those programs can fit and support those brand strategies that they already have laid out anyway, because that's a way that you can be part of bigger conversations. Because if you keep seeing like Web3 as an activation or Metaverse as a one-off activation, it's going to be much harder to be part of that wider conversation that could potentially shift the way that a company is developing itself in the future.
I think that that's the starting point of every conversation. Like the conversations is with some of these brands is never, hey, a third of the world is in gaming today, and the average age is 35, and it's 50% women, and this is going to be your audience, and you need to like think about that and the fact that that's where they're going to be and spend most of their time in, and instead, they're looking at it and thinking as if it's an opportunistic thing. But I love the insight, so thanks for that. I was just going to maybe ask you as a question. So how did you guys specifically overcome the idea of blockchain is a solution in search of a problem? Because that's, I think, going back to that idea of blockchain versus crypto and that separation. How do you then make sure that blockchain is not just one more solution, and how do you differentiate and say, hey, that's what we should be implementing at an enterprise level?
I mean, to be honest, I'm surprised we're having this conversation. It sounds like a conversation we were having sort of 2-3 years ago. I mean, I think we've moved on, right? To be really honest, I don't think we need to tell organizations what blockchain is. I don't think we need to convince them to use it. I think businesses are very intelligent. I don't think the technology was mature enough before. Although there was many organizations that tried to start permission chains, some failed, some of those experiments whetted the appetite. But I mean, to be honest, you know, the amount of enterprise adoption is very, very significant now. And so a lot of it you won't hear about. But in the banking sector, you probably do because you're a visitor. But in the banking sector, in the retail sector, in enterprise, there's a massive activity going on. There has been massive investment, which is probably outstripping some of the other things you'll hear about. And I think the key thing is how you use it, right? So I think before, you know, we were looking at permission chains, which was a temporary step. It was the only way that we could get a big enterprise to start dabbling in the technology because of the crypto issues, because of the security risks, because of some of the slowness and the gas fees, which clearly don't fit into business models. Now you've got you know, a lot of advances. So you've got layer 2s, which are helping massively. You've got you know, the advent of you know, what I call permission public. So this is where we're doing the same thing. You use a permission chain as a middleware to interface with public blockchain. And then you've got a lot of public blockchains that will allow you to have a permissioned strand in it. So we call that public permission. So there's a lot going on. But I mean, to be honest, I don't think Web3 should be overly worried about getting enterprises on. I think I think I think Web3 will create a lot of new businesses. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think you know, if you look at the sort of internet and Web 2, a lot of the companies didn't exist 10 years ago. Even you go back now, they're sort of 10 years old. I think that, you know, a lot of those big organizations will come from Web 3 and AI in the future. So I don't think they should be overly worried about it. I think they just need to do their thing. You know, smart contracts are changing the world. They're changing law. They're changing automation. DeFi is changing finance. NFTs are changing digital ownership. You can go on and on and on. And I think Web3 just needs to do what Web3 does, and I think the adoption will come. Yeah.
Technology eventually will always do its thing by itself, you know, regardless of whether, you know, what we think about it or not. But the truth is, I think it's refreshing to hear, you know, all of you talk about how enterprise is going to be the way forward, because as I was saying before, I think that on a B2C level, we haven't made it compelling enough, and I think that the enterprises are see that.
One point I want to get across, though. And it's something that disappoints me a bit with Web3. So there's 1.75 billion, maybe it's gone down now, people who don't have access to financial institutions, don't have access to start a business, can't participate in the gig economy or other things. And really, that's where Web3 should be starting, right? It should be starting as to how you can lower the barrier of entry of opportunity for those people. I think they get forgotten. We talk about banks, we talk about finance, and that's already there. You know, what about these guys who don't have an opportunity? And that's where I'd like to see some development.
I mean, arguably, that's what they're thinking about doing. That's why BRICS launched their own coin, right? That was on the news that they're thinking about. They haven't said it's going to be decentralized, but they're thinking about it's probably going to be. So there you go. So it's, yeah. Anyway, thank you. We're over time. Thank you, everyone, for your amazing contributions. Thank you, audience, for being here. Let's give these panelists a round of applause. Thank you. All right.